They are planning to go in a different direction at quarterback. Now we can only speculate about what the future holds for the all-time great signal caller and whether he'll be joining a new franchise or not. L. Duncan had this warning for any team seeking Rodgers' services yesterday on this show, specifically the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's not just about whether he can still contribute to a team. It's all the other stuff that comes along with him. It's the media appearances. It's the things that come out of his mouth. It's the ayahuasca trips. It's that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying to you, Harry, Stephen A., is who is looking at what they saw on the Jets last year and going, you know what? I will take a flyer. I'll take a gamble and deal with all of the circus that comes with Aaron Rodgers because what I'm seeing on the field I know is going to help me that much.
All right, Mr. Smith, the tee box is yours. Do you believe that Aaron Rodgers would be a culture killer in Pittsburgh?
I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't believe that for 1 second for one reason and one reason only, Mike Tomlin. There's nobody that's going to come into Pittsburgh and be a culture killer. I don't believe that for 1 second, especially now in the case of a quarterback the likes of Aaron Rodgers. We have to understand that when we look at Aaron Rodgers, and obviously Jay played in the NFL. Kimberly has been covering the NFL exceptionally well for more than a decade, and we know they know the inside. I'm not trying to sit up here and act like Aaron Rodgers is devoid of mistakes or mea culpas or he's never made any mistakes or anything. That's not where I'm going. But we have to understand this is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen. Before Patrick Mahomes came along, there was an argument that could be made that as a talent, Aaron Rodgers was the greatest quarterback we had ever seen, okay? He's going into the Hall of Fame. He's a Super Bowl champion. He's been to multiple conference championship games. He's one of the more accurate passers in the history of the National Football League. He doesn't turn the ball over often. He makes smart decisions and what have you. The issues that we have had with him primarily have been off the field, not on the field, not inside the locker room. He departed Green Bay. Obviously, they had Jordan Love, in the bullpen, and Matt LaFleur comes up in there, and he worked with Aaron Rodgers for a couple of years before they move on from that. We know some of the friction he had with Green Bay management because he couldn't make up his mind whether he wanted to retire, whether he wanted to move on, et cetera, et cetera. He comes to New York. He tears his Achilles the fourth play of the game. On a Monday night against the Buffalo Bills. I was right there in East Rutherford, New Jersey, okay? And he's out for the whole year. So last year was the first season, really, with the New York Jets, and obviously they were a flagrant disappointment. Even with a flagrant disappointment, even with it clearly being a down year for him, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, nearly 4,000 yards passing. And now, check this out, y'all. What's the comparison? Ben Roethlisberger should have retired 2 years earlier than he did. Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett. I mean, y'all kidding me? And then you got Justin Fields and Russell Wilson there. I'm like, it's not like Aaron Rodgers is succeeding Tom Brady or somebody. Listen to the names that I threw out there. And so if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you have an opportunity to get Aaron Rodgers and Pickens is still there and Warren and Najee Harris are still there and your defense, because you're smart enough to get T.J. Watt signed, is still the defense that we know the Pittsburgh Steelers to be, then what we projected and speculated about the New York Jets clearly would exist with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I definitely think it's something that they should strongly consider, and I'm not worried about him being some kind of culture killer at all. Mike Tomlin is running that show. I'm not worried about that.
Stephen, I agree with you because in Pittsburgh there's one voice, and it's Mike Tomlin. So Aaron Rodgers is not going to be able to come in and usurp all the power, all the attention, because no matter who they bring into that locker room, you understand that you sit in that, as a media person, you sit and you wait for Mike Tomlin to address you and say, good afternoon, let's get it going. That's the guy you pay attention to. However, here's where I think it gets dicey, because Mike Tomlin is somebody who was able to keep the AB drama, the Antonio Brown drama, the Le'Veon Bell drama, the Big Ben drama. Like he was able to close ranks around that, and we didn't find out until years later about some of that stuff. But where it gets tricky is Mike Tomlin introduces Aaron Rodgers into this mix. That Steelers roster, that offense, I would argue the Jets have a better offense. Like, they have better pieces. When you look at Aaron Rodgers had Devontae Adams, he had Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, he had all of these guys, and still he couldn't even win 10 games in 2 years with this team, right? When I look at the Steelers, he'd be playing behind not the greatest offensive line, and less weapons. Like George Pickens is a dog. I get that. But that part of the thing that handcuffed Russell and Justin was sort of like you got the moonballs to George Pickens, and that's really the offense. They didn't have a strong running game in Pittsburgh. So I think Mike Tomlin, a guy who internally they love, but within Pittsburgh for years, the fan base has been looking at him. A lot of people in that fan base have said, we either get to the playoffs and get bounced in the first round or we don't make the playoffs at all. The non-winning seasons, that streak, it doesn't mean anything because what is the standard? I think Aaron Rodgers, because of the diminished play, he has a chance to completely put Mike Tomlin just in the crosshairs of a lot of people. But when I look at the Steelers, I feel like, what are their options?
Yeah.
That's the problem. Steven, you pointed out Kenny Pickens, Mitchell Trubisky, all those guys. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is a better talent. But for a lot of reasons, they haven't been able to hit on that quarterback because they finished almost too good at the end of the season.
Yes.
And then not bad enough to get a top pick.
So we're now at a point where it's a good thing because we're comparing Rodgers to Kenny Pickett and because we're comparing him to Mitchell Trubisky. Like, it was one thing when Green Bay said goodbye. Like, we're better off without you. They had Jordan Love in place. They had a plan. The Rodgers act had worn thin. We all understood. When the Jets tell you we've had enough and there's absolutely no plan in place for who's going to take over, that's a red flag, especially, J-Mac, for a team in Pittsburgh that hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. They're one of 8 teams that hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. That list of the company they keep, this Pittsburgh culture that we think is so impressive, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Raiders, the Panthers, the Bears, the Cardinals, the Broncos, and the Steelers.
Yeah.
That's the Steeler culture. That's the team we're talking about. He's not going to come in and do anything other than maybe keep you afloat with this whole, we'll make the playoffs, and then we'll lose in the opening round situation.
And I think the Aaron Rodgers to Pittsburgh Steelers, it's a two-part thing because I think on one side you look at the football side of it and you say, all right, how much better does Aaron Rodgers make this roster than what Russell Wilson and Justin Fields did a year ago? Then the other side of it is the off-the-field stuff. And do you feel like if he walks into the locker room, he becomes a cancer or brings it down? I don't think that's the case. I agree with Stephen A. in the sense of Mike Tomlin runs things. Rodgers isn't coming in there and saying to them, hey, Omar Khan, I need you to go get this guy, that guy, bring him in, I need that. He's not running that building. And the difference is Mike Tomlin is a guy who's been in 2 Super Bowls, won one as a head coach and one as an assistant coach. He knows what success in the NFL looks like. When Rodgers joined the Jets, this was a team just searching to figure out how to go about an everyday cycle of a winning football team. So they just followed suit with Aaron Rodgers. I think the second part of it, the football side of it, I'm not convinced that he comes in with just pure ability. You take the appearances and media and all of that stuff away, that he